Hello and welcome. My name is Tokebi Games. I am a former Roblox engineer, and I will be teaching you how to develop game mechanics. In my previous video, I showed you how to set up your configuration files. Today, I'll continue from there and teach you how to sell your loot. First, we need to create a way for the client and server to communicate. To do that, we'll create a remote function called requestData. After that, we'll make some modifications to the loot module, since that's where the data is being saved. First, let's import our new function into the module. Then, let's proceed to code a function called sendData, which will retrieve the data stored in the data variable using the player's name and return it. If you don't remember, this is the block of code that stores the loot. We wrote it earlier in the project, and the data variable is declared at the top of the script. Once your sendData function is ready, we can connect it to our remote function so it can handle invocations from the client. When the client calls it, the function will return an array containing all the player's loot. Now we have to do some work on the client. Let's start by creating a new screen GUI under Starter GUI and name it Data GUI. Then, inside it, add a new module script and rename it to Data Script. Next, we'll take a look at how this script is coded. As you can see, this script is not that complicated. First, we import our remote function. Then we create a function called getData. This function sends a request to the server, which is handled in the module script, and the player data is sent back to the client. I've added a print statement so you can see how it works. But before we test it, we need to create a simple interface to trigger this script. Let's start by creating another GUI and naming it SellLoot. Inside it, add a frame and rename it Button Frame. Then place a text button inside the frame and call it Sell Button. Next, insert a local script into the button and rename it Button Script. Now we can add some code. The initial part is pretty simple. We locate the GUI that holds the module script we created earlier, import that module, and define a global variable so we can reference the data across multiple local scripts. After that, we create a function that connects to the button's mouse button one-click event. When the user clicks the button, this function will call gated from the module script to retrieve the data from the server. Now that everything is set up, let's see how it works in action. As I click on the Sell Ores button, you can see it's printing the local data, and right now, it's empty. So, let me head over to the rock and collect some loot first. After collecting the loot, I click the Sell button again, and now we can see actual loot data coming into the client. That means our setup is working and we're ready to start doing something with this data. Let's go back to our Sell Loot GUI and add another frame called Inventory Frame. Inside it, insert a scrolling frame. This is where we'll dynamically display our loot. Now add a UI list layout inside the scrolling frame. This component will organize the layout of the loot items automatically. Next, under the scrolling frame, add a local script and name it Loot Repeater. We'll also add another frame inside the scrolling frame and rename it Template. This will serve as the layout for each loot item. Inside the template, add two text labels, one to display the item name and another for the item value. Additionally, add a text button that will be used to sell the individual item. With the basic UI in place, we can start coding the loot repeater. To detect when the window is opened, we'll use getPropertyChange signal on the visible property of the inventory frame. When that signal fires, we first check if the frame is actually visible. If it is, we run a loop to clear any previously rendered items, since we don't want to display old or duplicate loot. Because the UI list layout, the repeater script, and the template are all inside the scrolling frame, we'll make sure to skip those when clearing. After that, we'll run another loop that uses the global data variable to clone the template and populate the UI with any items currently in your inventory. Next, we need to make our UI visible. To do that, we go back to our button script and add a line to set the inventoryFrame.visible property to true. With that in place, we're ready to test everything and see our loot appear in the UI. So let's see how this displays your items. As we collect loot, we can open the interface by clicking the Sell button. Inside, you'll see a list of the loot you've collected. Right now, when we click the sell button next to an item, nothing happens. And that's exactly what we're going to work on next. Let's add a new remote function under your remote functions folder and name it sell loot. This function will handle the interaction between the sell button in your interface and the server. Once that's set up, head back to your loot repeater script and add a few lines of code to make the sell button functional. The code to make this work is simple. It's just a mouse button one down connection on the sell button that calls the newly created sell loot remote function. Don't forget to import the remote function at the top of your script. This function will send the name of the item being sold to the server and receive a response indicating whether the sale was successful. The response can either be false or the updated total gold in your inventory. To display this gold to the player, we'll also add a text label to the UI that shows the current gold amount. Now on the server side, we need to make a few changes to enable selling loot. First, let's go to our Minables configuration file. You'll notice that there are currently no prices defined for any of the loot items. To fix this, let's add a dictionary that maps each loot item's name to its corresponding price. This is the simplest way to handle pricing for now, and in future videos, we'll look at how to improve and scale this approach. Back in our loot module script, we'll add the final pieces of code. First, we import the sell loot remote function and the Minables configuration file so we can access item prices. Then, we define a new function in the script called handle or sell. This function will be called by the remote function when it's triggered from the client. It receives the item name sent by the client, checks if it exists in the player's data, and if it does, calculates the total sale value by multiplying the item quantity by its price. Then, it adds or updates a new entry in the player's data called gold, which keeps track of total sales, and returns this value to the client. The client will then display the updated gold amount in the gold text UI we defined earlier. Finally, don't forget to connect the sell loot remote function to the handle or sell function so the server responds when the client invokes it. Now you're done. Let's test our new system. You've built a basic item selling system that works end-to-end. They can definitely be improved in the future. This is the first step towards making your game more interactive, engaging, and alive. You can have access to this file by following the link in the description to my GitHub repository. Also, please join my community on Roblox, Tokebi Academy, where you can have access to the demos and collaborate with me. If you have not done it yet, please take a minute to subscribe and like this video, as this will greatly help me to continue making this type of content. Thanks for watching, and hope to see your comments and suggestions.